When I worked at Disney World, there was one group of guests that the cast members hated and feared above all others. Well, when I got to revisit, they were still around, but it was a little different. In one of my early videos, I talked about the groups that cast members hated and feared. Tops among that groups was the tour groups. The ones that came from, in particular, Brazil and Argentina. Those groups, when the cast members knew that they were coming, you could just see the change in demeanor. The worry, the fear, the hatred. Even the guests that were familiar with them, because these groups were terrible at the time. You would hear them chanting and screaming all the way throughout the park. You'd have groups of anywhere from 30 to 150 teenagers from 12, 13, all the way up to the early 20s, clapping and shouting and chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting. Oh my goodness. You'd go into the shows like Carousel of Progress, Mickey's PhilharMagic. And in the middle of the show, they would start singing and chanting. Partially because they didn't understand the English, and partially you just like, oh my. We had more run-ins with them as both cast members and as guests at the time. Just hated when they were around. There were times when I would be on Main Street and you could just watch the wall come walking down Main Street. And really, that's what it was. It was a wall because they didn't let anybody go through the wall. They wouldn't stay on one side of the street or the other. They took the whole way and just walked and wouldn't move. You actually had to plant yourself. I'm not moving for them to go around you. And even then, you still were probably going to get shoulder blocked, bumped, and kicked. If we were with characters out on the street, we could always tell when they came up behind us because it was like this wall formed behind you, and they would start pushing in because they didn't want to wait in line. It made you wonder if they understood what a line was. I talked in that original video about the time that I honestly thought they were going to kill Mickey and Minnie because there was a couple hundred of them all trying to get to them at once. And those of us working with them had to form this little wall of protection and try to get them off stage because it was just so dangerous. Certain cultural limits that we have here, they ignored routinely. I talked about the time at Splash Mountain when they decided they were going to change their clothes for the ride, out in front of the ride. Yeah, unfortunately I had to witness that one. I've actually heard from other guests that had very similar instances, including one that they did it in the line for the ride. And part of it you understand because they're young kids, they're away from home for the first time. They're in this new country, in a fun place that's known for being able to have fun. Lack of supervision. In fact, they had terrible supervision if they had any. And they just went nuts during the time, whether it was in the parks or at the hotels. And I've heard horror stories of what they were like at the resorts. You would have 100 teens and you'd have 1 or 2 adults with them. Not only is there no way 1 or 2 adults is going to control that many teens, but half the time it was the adults that were leading the misbehavior, encouraging the chants, shoving through lines. My family had a couple times we were completely split up by them. Honestly, as a cast member, they drove you nuts. You hated the couple of months when they were in real heavy numbers, but they come throughout the whole year. There just really wasn't any way to get around them. And you could spot them coming if you didn't hear them first by the little flags that their group would carry. And as soon as you saw those little tour group flags, it was just like, oh no, here they come. And if you were like a photographer like me and you could see it, you would try to duck out of the way and get them past you. But if you were stuck in the middle, man, you were just stuck. I did have a couple times that I was taking pictures of other families and didn't see them and realized what was happening until too late and just got banged and slammed and bumped. Now, one misinterpretation I did give in that original video, it made it sound like it was everybody from, in particular, Brazil. And it's not. The families that came in were wonderful. In fact, I saw several families that were just absolutely appalled and disgusted and totally embarrassed by the way that they saw these groups behaving. Kind of like when I went to Paris and then I would watch certain other American tourists behave there and just go, oh my goodness, I don't want to be like that. Although it was very interesting because Disneyland Paris, they also had the tour groups. Although I don't think they were quite the same as the ones we have here. But you could just see that these poor people visiting Disney World were looking at the tour groups and it was just not what they wanted their country to be thought of. And unfortunately, they kind of got drowned out. There are some wonderful people I met from Brazil and Argentina. Sweet, wonderful, beautiful, happy, friendly. And then they would look at the group and just go, oh no. No, I'm not like that. I want to be very clear that these groups are not like everybody in the country. And I got some very interesting feedback on that video from it. But what was very interesting was a couple years ago when I finally got to make my return to Walt Disney World. After 7 years of not having been there, I had heard that Disney had taken some steps to try to fix the problem, to try to correct it, because it was so bad that there were actually people that were telling Disney, I'm not going to Disney World as long as they're going to be there. They were horrendous at the hotels, they would take over the pools, they'd make noise all night, not fun in the parks because they would disturb the rides and the lines, and it's okay to have fun, but not when it not only intrudes on other people, but really makes their experience bad. It was just too much. Disney decided to start taking some steps, and I'd been hearing about these steps over the years, and finally got to see the product somewhat when I got to visit in 2018 and 19. One of the first things Disney did was they started letting these tour groups know, we're going to supervise and monitor which groups you are, and if your group is not supervised and they're misbehaving, we're going to ban your tour company. We're not going to let you buy tickets. We're not going to let you stay at the resorts. And from what I heard, they banned a few companies. So there were several of the worst companies that, as I understand it, got basically closed out of Disney and told you can't come. They also started requiring more supervision and started keeping track a lot more of the groups. One of the other things Disney did that I think was wonderful, and I got to see this in action on one of my trips, they started assigning cast members who spoke Portuguese and Spanish, Portuguese for the Brazilians, Spanish for the Argentinians, and their whole job was basically to shadow these tour groups. They were Disney cast members, made it obvious they were Disney cast members, and they were there to work as interpreters, so you didn't have 15 kids all shouting at one poor merchandise person in Portuguese and yelling at them for not understanding, and oh yeah, that was just horrible when I would see that. Instead, you've got the Disney cast member there who can translate and who explains what's happening, supervises them in a sense, tells them what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. Hey, you guys can do this, please do that, don't form a wall, get out of the way. And I actually did see the group staying on the side of the sidewalks as opposed to taking up the whole thing. So that was much improved. These assistants, and I don't know what their official title is, you could see they provided a huge service and a huge help, where the groups were looking to them for assistance as opposed to just running wild. Plus, it gave Disney a visible presence there that kind of said, we're watching you, and if you're not going to behave, we're going to haul you off. I don't think they necessarily had to say that, but it definitely gave the idea that we're going to make sure you're going to behave. So that was a huge, huge help. That, and I believe they sent out other guides and instructions to tour groups and said, this is what is expected. And you could just see the difference in behavior. Not just at Disney, but even at other parks. When I went to Universal in January of 2018, we got passed by a pretty good-sized tour group on the way into Hogwarts, and it was amazing, the behavior. I have to say, I'm really impressed actually with this tour group because they are being really good. And I think this is the end of them. There we go. Quiet, orderly. They can come back anytime. Does that mean that they're perfect? Oh, no. There's still definitely room. In fact, when I went to the Coca-Cola Club Cool to go sample the different flavors at Epcot, that was actually one time, it was almost like the tour group of old, where I got shoulder blocked by the leader out of the way of the drink station so she could get to it first. Notice who was next and who cut in the way. Yes, Brazil. Dun dun dun. Actually, most of the kids were better behaved than the leader in that case. Not just me, she shoved aside that other kid that was waiting too. There are still some issues with some of the leaders and some of the groups. They're not perfect. They do still want to clump together and sometimes push people aside on rides, but nowhere near like it was. I noticed that they were quieter when walking. They might occasionally do a chant, but it wasn't the overwhelming drown everything out around you kind of stuff that they used to do. They walked more politely and quieter, like I said, on the sides versus taking up the whole thing. It was just a very different kind of behavior. where there were actually times on a couple of my trips I was watching and I was going, wow, okay, that's a tour group because they've got the flag, they've got the shirts, but they're so much more quieter and more polite. I could deal with this. Honestly, what I saw the tour groups would do almost kind of a flip, where in the past I would have put the tour groups way above the cheerleaders. The cheerleaders were bad. They were bad. But the tour groups so drowned them out. I don't know how the cheerleaders are in the parks now, but if the cheerleaders are still the same as where they were, they would have very easily taken the top spot from what I saw the tour groups. Now, when I visited in January and July, so I did not see the tour groups at their height. In fact, I was there in October as well, and I think I saw 1 or 2 groups. So I didn't see the high point of the season, which is usually late spring. It's very possible that they're still pretty bad. And if you're a current cast member or a guest who's seen this in the last 2-3 years, I'd love to hear your feedback. Please leave it in the comments. All I know is I used to hate when they came. They used to be so bad that if we saw a tour group coming up to see one of the characters, some of us wouldn't even take pictures. We knew they weren't going to buy it. We knew that we were going to get them running in front of us while we were going to take the pictures and cutting us off, and we wouldn't have a chance anyways, or shoving their camera in our face. Just a horrible thing. And our whole deal at that point became to protect the characters, help them survive this group, and get the group out. Whereas when I saw the tour groups when I was there the last couple years, they waited their turns, they were polite, they were respectful, the photographers got their pictures, and it went wonderfully. It was like, wow, I could have liked working with them this way. So much better. So much safer. So not crazy and insane. So pleasant. Like regular guests. I would love to know your experience with the tour groups. Recent or past? Like I say, in the past they were horrible. Recently, my impression is better. What's your impression? I'd love to hear it. Please leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, share, and subscribe as well if you haven't, and check the description. There's a ton of info there about merchandise, SirWillow shirts and pins, fan pages, all sorts of stuff like that. There's also information there about my financial supporters, my members on YouTube, and my patrons on Patreon. They're the ones that actually help provide a good portion of the funds to help me go to Disney World the last couple years, and the trips wouldn't have happened without them. I am very grateful for their help, and they do get a number of perks and special surprises as well for being part of that group, along with more access. If you'd like to know more about it, please check the links in the description below. I also want to give a huge shout out to Mike, my brand new patron, for signing up this week. Thank you so much, Mike, and welcome to the team. Thank you as well so much for watching, and God bless. When I worked at Disney World, Brazilian tour groups revisited. Thank you. After almost 10 years of not having been there, after almost 8 years of not having been there, it was really kind of fun to be able to go back, and it's still not right, is it? 18? It was 7 years. I can't count. Did I get everything? I think so. Do I need to splice anything in? I think that's it. Okay. I think we're good. Woohoo! If you'd like to know about my merchandise, fan pages, and more, be sure to check the description below. If you'd like to know whenever I've got a new video posted, well, make sure you hit that button right up there and subscribe. If you'd like to watch another one of my videos, I've got a great one for you right here. And if you'd like to be like these wonderful people here and support me financially on Patreon, well, make sure you check the link right there. There's even some extra perks for them. Thank you so much, and God bless.